You've seen them. The engagement farm gamer posts listing dozens of franchises from your childhood with some caption like, "One row has to go," or "Which one was your go-to?" But no matter how detailed the franchise list is, there's almost certainly one that's missing. And that's because, like a bad Mandela effect, it's also missing from your childhood. You're living in an altered timeline, one that you have no memory of entering and can't even sense around you. You've probably heard of a Mandela effect before, a popular zeitgeist phenomenon in which some or most people remember something from their past very differently, like the spelling of Berenstain Bears, the cornucopia in the Fruit of the Loom logo, or the existence of a film from the 90s called Shazam. Well, you live in a world right now that is very much like this, but none of us have any memories of the alternate timeline, one that we were destined for, but some cosmic dark forces have worked tirelessly to keep us out of to this very day. A world where a medieval fantasy JRPG with art and creature design by Dragon Ball creator Akira Toriyama took the world by storm in the late 80s and became a mega franchise that rivals The Legend of Zelda and Final Fantasy. A world where you wore the pajamas, ate the breakfast cereal, and played with your favorite action figures while watching the cartoon series every Saturday morning. And every year as a kid, you eagerly anticipated a new release in one of your favorite franchises of all time. That franchise is, of course, Dragon Quest. This is what your childhood should have looked like. This is the true timeline that we fell out of all the way back in 1989, and the reality that has been fighting to break through endlessly for 4 decades. Now, this video won't be a comprehensive deep dive into every factor that held the overseas versions of Dragon Quest back, but we are planning on doing a big video on that soon, so stick around and subscribe to the channel if you want to learn more. This video is simply an overview and a taste of this strange failed localization of one of the greatest JRPG titles of all time, and a brief look into the magic your childhood missed out on. Now, let's go a little deeper. Even after hundreds of hours of research, it can be very difficult, almost impossible, to get a full grasp of the impact and popularity that Dragon Quest has enjoyed in Japan. Though the first title in the series initially struggled a bit upon release, the excitement around the game grew and sales increased until they hit solid numbers. And that excitement only increased for the follow-ups that came out very quickly. By the time the third installment hit, less than 2 full years after the first game launched, the popularity in Japan had already reached insane levels, leading to massive lines and crowds waiting for the game at launch. The hype was so big, in fact, that it spawned the urban legend that a law was passed in Japan to prevent the release of such games on a weekday because of the economic impact the release had, from so many people calling in sick to work and skipping school. While this is a myth, it is also true that the launch of Dragon Quest III did create a measurable economic impact from the chaos and excitement surrounding the game, that people really did call in sick in droves to stay home and play it, and Enix, later Square Enix, did decide to change their release strategy voluntarily to avoid future disruptions. Defying conventional expectations of a new game series, around the same time, multiple orchestral performances of the game's traditionally composed score were released, including one as a Disney Fantasia-inspired home video release. They also launched an excellent anime series and a few manga titles. Merchandise also followed quickly, and before the year 1990 and the 4th installment's release, Dragon Quest was already a massive cultural phenomenon and a gaming staple in Japan that could rival Mario and Zelda. In fact, the game went on to win Famitsu's inaugural Game of the Year award, beating out Super Mario Bros. 1 and 2, Metroid, and the original Legend of Zelda that year. And all of the first 4 Dragon Quest titles would enjoy the same recognition in 87, 88, and 90 respectively. Dragon Quest is also a top seller in Japan, with every title doing very well there, and some doing unbelievably well. In the early years, even regularly beating out Final Fantasy sales figures. Dragon Quest is massive in Japan. and I really can't oversell that point. So why did it not receive the same response overseas, and in many cases actually received the exact opposite response? There are several different theories and case studies on why exactly that is, but most of them at least agree on a failed adaptation and release strategy. Again, keeping a very long and detailed story very simple for now, the main issues in the early years are threefold. First, the title was changed for copyright reasons from Dragon Quest to Dragon Warrior, and the localization team, which didn't think the kiddie anime art of Akira Toriyama would do well in the States, opted to redo all of the art for the game. This completely altered the perception of what kind of game Dragon Warrior was, evoking a more serious Dungeons & Dragons style. Yet the character and monster designs in-game retained their whimsical and cartoony nature, and over the series releases, the cover art began to look more and more generic, and less like the trailblazing genre-defining title it was in Japan. Second, the release of the first 4 titles was messy. The first title wasn't brought over to the States for 3 years. Compare that to Legend of Zelda, which came over the year after its Japanese release. So as games were getting bigger and better and developers were pushing the limitations of the NES further and further, suddenly an older game is released and already feels dated. Keep in mind, the 4th title was deep in development in Japan at the time and had something like 6 times the internal memory the first game had. The following releases of 2 and 3 didn't change this perception, and by the time 4 was released in the US on the NES, the Super Nintendo was already being teased, showing off new hardware advancements. So the games always felt less than their counterparts, especially Final Fantasy, which opted to skip 2 of their early titles and jump straight from the first game to adapting one of their newest and best at the time for American audiences, which solidified them as the genre definer in America before Dragon Quest could take that rightful title. Third, and finally, Dragon Quest V and VI on the Super Famicom and the 1 through 3 upgraded remakes were never ported to the US Super Nintendo. These games had massive graphical and gameplay developments that might have done better here, but it seems like, after 4 attempts and dwindling sales, they were just tired of trying. This all meant that if you knew about Dragon Quest, it was as Dragon Warrior, a game that seemed to be chasing the stylings of Conan and Dungeons & Dragons that always felt a little quaint, and was maybe even a C-tier bargain series on the NES. You would then not see another new mainline release again until 7 on the PlayStation 1. There's much more to this story, including the fact that 13 episodes of the anime were also adapted and brought to the States as Dragon Warrior, but we will save that for a later video. Now, it might still be hard to picture the place Dragon Quest should have held in gaming history, so let's try an analogy using 2 other popular series from the time. Imagine Mortal Kombat is Final Fantasy, and Street Fighter is Dragon Quest. Both genre-defining games with a massive legacy and history, they both also fought for the title of Best Fighter Game, and both have their merits as a contender for that title. Now, Street Fighter came first and defined the genre. Then Mortal Kombat redefined that genre and made it even more memorable. This is the same story for Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy in Japan. Now let's imagine events unfolded a little different. It's 1990, and Mortal Kombat is releasing very soon. Less than 1 year ago, Street Fighter 1 was released, and though it looks okay by comparison, Mortal Kombat just feels like it has more to it. Maybe you tried your hand at Street Fighter, or maybe you didn't even have interest in the arcade fighting genre until your friend showed you Mortal Kombat. Either way, Mortal Kombat just seems more memorable and interesting with a bit more style and polish. You love it, and wouldn't you know it, Mortal Kombat 2 is coming just next year. But this isn't the Mortal Kombat 2 you or I know. No, in this alternate timeline, Mortal Kombat 3 Ultimate is renamed as 2. And wouldn't you look at that, here comes Street Fighter 2. Looks kind of weak by comparison. Next, the Mortal Kombat trilogy is released as Mortal Kombat 3 the following year, and someone bought you a copy of the new Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Street Fighter is okay, but it's nothing compared to the A-tier headliner that is Mortal Kombat. But now Mortal Kombat 4 is coming, and look how crazy the graphics look. And it's basically a launch title for the new system. What is Street Fighter doing? Releasing Super Street Fighter 2. This feels old, and it's still on the Super Nintendo when the N64 and PS1 are almost here. So around this time, you forget about Street Fighter, and follow every Mortal Kombat release from then on. Only occasionally are you vaguely aware of that old C-tier wannabe Street Fighter trying to make a comeback and releasing the odd title here or there. But it's just not the big deal that Mortal Kombat is, and feels like a dozen other fighter games like Virtua Fighter, King of Fighters, Fatal Fury, Streets of Rage, and you just aren't a big enough fan of the genre to wade into all of those smaller franchises that sort of blend together. And after all, aren't they all sort of knockoffs of Mortal Kombat anyway? Well, that's not a perfect one-to-one comparison, but it is a good simple analogy that paints the picture of what happened to Dragon Quest, at least in America. This is how badly the release strategy and localization choices of a series can tarnish its perception in the average gamer's mind, the people who enjoy games but can't follow more than a few titles a year. And Dragon Quest seemed more or less content to accept this fate and just focus on its oversized local market, where success was never ending. Again, it's more complicated than that, but we'll dig into it in another video. Even in 2001, when they finally did port a title over again, it was still under the name Dragon Warrior, but maintained its 7 numbering, alienating more people than it was likely to pull in, since the last title they got was 4. It wasn't until Dragon Quest VIII, yes, Quest, because they were finally able to obtain the Dragon Quest copyright in the States, that they were able to start changing the perception of the series here. And a lot of that was due to a demo for Final Fantasy XII being included in the game. So desperate Mortal Kombat Final Fantasy fans would have to buy Dragon Quest VIII to get a taste of the new Final Fantasy title. This did work a bit, and 8 did have a bigger splash than its predecessors. But they had a long way to go now to change, at that point, a 16-year-long perception of the series, if people even knew what it was before 8 at all. By this point, a whole generation of children had been robbed of the true Dragon Quest experience. Now quickly here, I'll summarize even more shortly another large topic worthy of a deep dive, and maybe the most important in the changing perception of Dragon Quest, the DS remake era. For younger players, let's say roughly mid-20s and below, their experience with Dragon Quest may have been a little better, as multiple titles were remade for the DS and saw a much wider release. This included 4, the first official US releases of 5 and 6, as well as remakes of 7 and 8. So this generation had access to a lot more high-quality Dragon Quest content, and with emulation or a Game Boy Color, could play through the entire series for the first time and under the Dragon Quest title. But this era wasn't perfect, and still failed to translate the full depth of what Dragon Quest was to the rest of the world. Square Enix did not remake the Erdrick trilogy of 1 through 3, though they were previously ported to the Game Boy Color, so diehards could get a hold of them if they were lucky or could emulate them to get the full experience, but casual players still only had access to half the franchise, and since the remake started at the 4th installment, it didn't create the ideal entry point for new players. Despite this, a decent chunk of new players experienced Dragon Quest for the first time and became massive fans. A lot of the great Dragon Quest YouTubers out there now, I believe, were in this generation or the following. So it's clear Dragon Quest had a deeper impact in the West with this generation than previous. But it still was held back tremendously from general popularity by even more strange happenstances and simple market mistakes. And so another era came and went, with the true timeline being held back from us once again. And finally, we come to the final era before the current one that we just entered, and the briefest one. After 8, Dragon Quest entered a bit more of an experimental era. It began with Dragon Quest IX being released on the DS rather than home consoles. This was a departure, but one that was driven by the ambition to expand Dragon Quest to a hybrid multiplayer experience. Oddly enough, Dragon Quest IX actually did get a large marketing push outside of Japan and did very well by comparison. It sold even better than Dragon Quest VIII. Again, Dragon Quest had a new opportunity to bring its legacy across the West, but the follow-up title Dragon Quest X was developed as an MMO, and to date has never seen a Western release, even of its alternate offline version. While this does make sense that a game of this magnitude would not be ported to its smaller markets, the fact that this creative choice was made just as 9 was selling record units in North America and Europe was a cosmic banana peel gag for the series. And now that game development cycles were getting much longer, this meant there was another overly long break before the next mainline title released overseas. It would be more than 7 years before Dragon Quest tried to penetrate the Western market with the release of Dragon Quest XI. And while it may be too early to say definitively, the slow-growing momentum of the series may finally be paying off as sales once again greatly increased and reached numbers that finally made the efforts of making the series accessible to Western markets make financial sense. The release of Dragon Quest XI is an incredible nexus point for the franchise and my hypothetical timeline conflict. It seems rather poetic to me that the game that has the potential to turn the tide in this war would be one in which time and the hope of restoring an ideal timeline despite the impossible odds against it would be the one to change cosmic fate for all of us. And the strange Nexus experience is perfectly mirrored in the reaction to the crossover announcement, which successfully raised the general awareness of Dragon Quest in the West, at the same time that it perfectly captured, in a historic snapshot, the profound difference in perception of the franchise inside and outside of Japan. I'm talking, of course, of the inclusion of Dragon Quest's Hero and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. In June of 2019, Hero, consisting of 4 Dragon Quest characters from 3, 4, 8, and 11 respectively, was announced as one of the 2 new fighters for Super Smash Bros. And the pacing and presentation of this reveal really speak of how big of a deal this was for the developers. The teaser shows Link fighting for his life against possessed versions of Marth and Meta Knight as a rider desperately races to reach the fray in time. And at the last moment, the rider rescues Link and is revealed to be Hero. For many in the West, this moment was a dud that simply revealed yet another anime sword fighter. But for Japan, this moment was like seeing Mario rescue Sonic, Mega Man rescue Samus, or Superman rescue Captain America. Different characters sharing a few core DNA elements being united on screen in a seminal moment. Comparisons between Link and Hero have been drawn all the way back in '86, when both franchises began, and the 2 series shared a friendly rivalry for decades. The creators were even once interviewed together in Japan in 1990, and this terrific art of the 2 as their main characters was designed for the publication. This was a fun and momentous moment for Japanese players that most Western players had zero context for. In the West, the other fighter reveal, shown on the same day, that of Banjo-Kazooie, received more than twice the views and far more fervor, but the Japanese reaction to Hero was even greater than that. And the excitement when the 3 additional heroes were revealed is almost palpable. Yet, it was just another moment of magic that Western players didn't get to experience. Another moment missing from childhoods. This time, the moment was shared by Western players, but though they witnessed the same event, they were still experiencing it from our darker timeline, so the meaning and experience couldn't translate. Stories are more than mere text. They are inherently metatextual. How stories are shared with you, presented to you, and where you are in your life have a profound impact on what a story is to you. To share a little from my personal experience, I grew up at the perfect time to be a Harry Potter fan, being 6 years old when the first film released. I was at the prime age to experience the films and grow up with those characters, but I was raised in a firmly anti-Potter household. After the initial disappointment of not seeing the first film, I didn't care too much, not really having an interest in the series beyond mild curiosity, and was much more interested in things like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and Legend of Zelda. So even after I grew up and left my family home, it wasn't until a good ways into college that I got curious enough to check the films out, mostly out of boredom. But after the second film, I was hooked and watched through the whole series. And as I watched it, I grew more and more aware of the experience I was robbed of. These films were meant to be enjoyed by children and adolescents, and was uniquely crafted for them. And though I am a fan of the series and enjoy them a good deal, there's an experience that I will never have with them that most of my friends did. I can imagine that experience, but I can't change the past. A bit of magic will always be missing from my childhood. And sadly, the same is true for all of us Western gamers when it comes to the magic of Dragon Quest. While it is meant for all ages, there is something very special I can imagine about playing these games when you're young, and the way it becomes a part of your childhood you may or may not outgrow, but will never forget. The pain of leaving home and family never to return from 3, learning the stories and struggles of all of your friends firsthand in 4, and the incredibly beautiful lesson of parents and the sacrifices they make for their children from 5. It is one of those influential series that teach you a lot of valuable lessons that family, friends, or teachers may forget to impart. That magic and those stories are what this strange cosmic force has held back from all of us through a series of very strange and most unfortunate events. Beneath its cute art design, classic turn-based combat, and occasionally adolescent humor is a beating heart that creator Yuji Horii seems to have wrestled with tirelessly for 4 decades to maintain. That the world is often dark, painful, and heartbreaking, full of hate, betrayal, and loss. But despite all of that, there is always a new dawn seeking to break over the horizon. That through all the pains and disappointments of life, the holding onto of hope will always see the darkness broken and life and love eternally renewed. That's the light found in the heart of all of the great stories that see you through life's hardships. And in Dragon Quest, that hope is seated early in childhood in the longing for adventure, and is there throughout your life to remind you of that truth whenever you've lost your way. And that, dear friends, is what the cosmic darkness has tried desperately to keep from you. But dawn does finally seem to be breaking, and that crossover promotion in 2019 was perhaps the turning point of our entire timeline. Despite the muted reception to the character announcement, it drew the right attention and raised awareness tremendously for the series. The largest new swath of Western Dragon Quest fans were born in the aftermath of that reveal and subsequent definitive release of DQ11. The entry that is all about fixing the failures of a broken timeline may have been the one to begin the healing of our own. Since then, Dragon Quest popularity has been slowly but steadily growing, with more adaptations, spin-offs, and promotions seeing Western releases every year. There's never been a better time to be a Western Dragon Quest fan, though of course, most of us still wish we got half of what our Japanese counterparts got. And with the newly released HD 2D remake of the Erdrick trilogy, Western audiences finally have multiple convenient jumping off points for the series. It also seems more and more likely that we are going to see remakes of most, if not all, of the previous mainline entries, which is important because not only will it make enjoying the series outside of Japan easier and more accessible than ever before, it also means you will be able to share what was lost and will soon be fully reforged with your own children. For us, that is an amazing possibility. You may have noticed in our channel launch animation that one of the driving forces for us making this channel is the coming birth of my wife Alexandria and I's first child. Both of us had very troubled childhoods, so creating a very stable and healthy home for our coming little one has been really important to us. And Dragon Quest is one of those things we look forward to sharing with our child and enjoying together as a family, sitting down to enjoy a new chapter in the series once a year. We're glad that with everything changing, our child will have the chance to enjoy Dragon Quest as it was meant to be enjoyed, if they so choose to venture forth. I think that just about brings us to the end of this video. But as one final note, I would like to say that everything we covered here are major motivating forces behind why we made this channel. Dragon Quest is in a new era in the West, and has the potential to finally catch on in a big way. but I believe that won't happen unless we build a warm and welcoming place for newcomers, and share our love for the series in a way that is accessible to outsiders. That's what we aim to do here with this channel, and if you want to join us in that journey, we encourage you to subscribe, follow us over on Instagram and X, and become a part of the discussion and share your love for the series with us. The more we engage with and build up the Dragon Quest community, the more people are likely to join and experience the magic of Dragon Quest for themselves. But it's going to take all of us working together if we're going to overcome 4 decades of uneven localization and promotion in the West. As always, thank you for watching these videos and sharing them, sharing your thoughts with us, and most importantly, thank you for helping our party grow.